Nature Breakthroughs with Dr. Wild Ben Goldman. Conversations with changemakers in a world gone mad. To discover what you need for personal, organizational, and societal change, get your free download of 3 ancient rituals smart entrepreneurs use to bounce back from shifts in the market and inside themselves. Go to www.naturebreakthroughs.com.
Yes, you pull them till they bite down. On the lies that you built from my doubt. I don't want money, I don't want cars, I just wanna be free.
So welcome Justin Tucker to Nature Breakthroughs, conversations with change makers in a world gone mad. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to see where this conversation leads.
Me too. And how I like to do them is just, like you say, a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And in looking over, in reading about you, one of the themes that I get is that you're starting over. I think that's your phrase, right?
Yep.
So what? Tell me, what are you starting over? What is that? Or tell me, who are you?
Especially right now, most definitely starting over. I was laid off from my job about a week and a half ago due to the pandemic and everything else going on right now. I also left my apartment in New Jersey and I moved back in with my parents in Maryland. And initially I thought it was just going to be a temporary stay until things sort of settled down. But now I'm thinking I might remain here for a little while, or I may decide to just get my things and go somewhere else. So yeah, it's really a time where I've had to sit back and think, okay, this is where my life has brought me so far. Let's see if where I'm headed looks a little different than what I may have done, and think about what I might want to do going forward and how I might want to start that process. So yeah, it's been a lot, but it's kind of exciting.
And I think you're not alone.
Yeah. A lot of people are in a similar situation as myself, and I think that for a lot of people, it's probably a stressful time, especially as they're trying to figure out how they're going to take care of themselves and their families. But for me, I'm fortunate enough to have like a family to fall back on. Like I mentioned, I've been in their house for the past 3 months, and it's been great to just take some time away from the city life because I've gotten so used to that over the last 5 years, and the constant motion and the fun has just been the complete opposite of that. And I really needed it. And I think a lot of people probably need it more than what they may have imagined. So
A lot of people may need what?
just this time to stop and reassess and reevaluate where they are in their lives and what direction they may take moving forward from here.
So where are you now? You missed the first Campfire City, which was all about that, and I used a kind of approach called the 4 directions to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
How did you like it last night, the Campfire City?
I thought it was really great.
Yeah.
I've done some other virtual sort of meetups similar to that, and I always loved them.
Yeah.
The meditation was amazing, and I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. So you were in marketing, and you come from the fashion industry, right?
Yep.
You were at Bloomingdale's, and it seems like you've, at your young age, have had quite a career already in fashion, right?
Yep, and that was my whole reason for moving to New York City in the first place. At the time, 5 or 6 years ago, I wanted to be at the top of the fashion industry. I wanted to be at the fashion shows. I wanted to be working for all of the top designer brands that you'll hear about, like the Gucci's and Pradas and Louis Vuittons. And in some aspects, I accomplished that. I worked for GQ magazine in their fashion department. I've worked for brands like Lacoste, and I ended up at Bloomingdale's, and I was there for the past 2.5 years doing marketing for them. And as I mentioned before, I was recently laid off. So now it's just time to see is going to be the thing that I continue on with.
And do you have an inkling?
Yeah, I really want to do more work in the outdoor industry. Well, right now there's a large focus on bringing more diversity into the outdoor setting. And I really want to play a part of that. So actually recently I've been interviewing with a climbing gym back here in Baltimore. And their whole mission right now is to sort of change the dynamics of the gym so that it represents more of the community that it sits within, which is the community of Baltimore. I grew up in Baltimore, and things like climbing and hiking and kayaking weren't really things that I was exposed to. So I had no idea that those were even an option for me. And it took up until the time that I moved to New York City and I started to see, oh, there's so many other things out there. And so now I'm just diving in head first, and I want to bring whoever. That's really what I'm looking to do right now. And I think this is the perfect time to really make that transition.
So I have like kind of two questions, which is how did this outdoor drive start for you? Like, and then that's one question, and then the other is why is the I'd like to explore why there's such a lack of diversity in that. I think there's some deep things going on there.
Yeah. For me, the interest really peaked about 2 to 3 years ago. I was still working for Bloomingdale's at the time, and I just remember this feeling of needing to do something different or needing to go somewhere that I haven't been before. I came across this story about Iceland, and I read through it. I heard that there were mountains there, black sand beaches, geothermal pools, and I just decided that that's where I was going to go. So just on a whim, I booked a flight, flew there for 10 days, rented a car, drove around the country, stayed in hostels, slept in the back of the car, hiked along glaciers, and did all the things that I never knew I could do.
And that's probably, I mean, I don't know that much about Iceland, but I would suspect that's probably not a very diverse country, is it? Or is it? I don't know that much about it.
I'm not sure. Well, from what I saw, I was the only person of color, but I never felt in danger or threatened or anything like that. It's also a very active tourist country, so you see people from all over there to see the same things, I guess, and to explore the same way I was. And being there by myself, it was something that I never thought that was possible for me, because I had hardly ever left the country before. Going someplace like Iceland, that was never thought of in my community where I grew up. So it was a completely new experience. And while I was there, I knew that I wanted to keep having that feeling that I had of just seeing new things and doing new things, and I just decided to keep going.
Is there an indigenous population still there, or did you have any contact with that, or?
I'm not sure about that. I was a little nervous while I was there, so I tried to limit communications with as many people as possible. I may have chatted with a store clerk briefly as I bought groceries and things like that, but other than that, I just sort of kept to myself.
What were you nervous about?
Nervous about how people might react to me. I don't know how many Black people visit Iceland, but I knew being there by myself put me at a potentially a greater risk. So I just like to sort of keep my distance in those sorts of situations if I don't know how people might respond. And not only am I a Black person, but I'm a Black gay person, and I'm covered in tattoos, as you can see. So it can be a lot for someone to take in. So sometimes I'm a little hesitant to really engage.
You think that nervousness is emblematic of the lack of diversity in the outdoor space?
Probably, yeah. Um, Going out into these wild settings, you don't really expect to see a whole lot of people who look like me, or at least I didn't expect to see it. And that's because the people back home who I would talk to about all the things that I was doing, I would always get the same reactions from them, like, what? Black people don't do that. Or why would you want to go out there? And they would literally tell me that I'm going to die because they just assume that I don't know what I'm doing and I'm going to get mauled by a bear or I'm going to fall off a cliff or something. So that it raises the worries a little bit.
Well, I mean, I think there's nervousness by all people about nature.
Yeah.
I experience that a lot with my wild call weekends, that people are afraid of being in nature. And, you know, there's good reason to be careful. Well, there's good reason. You know, we're so distant from nature now that we don't have basic knowledge and understanding. So people
Right.
can use inappropriate things that increase their risk, for sure. But for, you know, African Americans especially, there's a whole bunch of other associations, you know, with the wilderness that, you know, it's deeply ingrained in the history here.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that contributed to what other people were saying to you.
Yeah. You know, history has sort of taught African Americans to not stray too far from familiar territory because there's the chance that you may not return, or at least that was the thought back in the civil rights era and things like that. And even still today, some of the things that were going on back in the civil rights era, there's reason to believe that they are potentially still occurring in the present day. Like I remember seeing an article on CNN just in the last week or so about an attempted lynching out in Bloomington, Indiana over the past week or so. And, you know, those fears are still there, still prevalent. But for some of us, we're not going to allow that fear to keep us sheltered. So I'm one of the ones who I'm still going to go out and do what I need to do and see what the world has to offer.
And I suspect that it's not just about going to new places or foreign places, even if it's just several blocks from your neighborhood. But it is specifically about nature, being in the woods, being around trees.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrible that. I mean, it's so sad, but there's a specific fear of nature. Like I said, everyone has it at some level. You know, nobody wants to encounter a lion, you know, unprotected.
Right.
But then there's a whole other layer of how nature, how you know, white people have used nature to terrorize black people.
Right.
And so how do we change that? How do we all what needs to happen?
That's a tough question that a lot of us have thought about. Personally, I think that change needs to happen on an individual level. I don't really want to speak for other races or ethnic backgrounds, but it can't just be tolerance. Like I see a lot of arguments that, oh, the outdoors is open to everyone. There are no signs that say white people only. And I view that as saying, yeah, it's open to everyone, but we don't really care if you have the resources to make it out here or not. It's just here if you happen to come upon those resources. But I want to shift that narrative. So actually, this is just a tough question, and I don't know if I have the answer right now.
Well, I mean, part of what you're doing to shift the narrative, I think, I see you're using social media to show a black man in the nature.
Yeah.
With joy and beauty.
Yeah.
Make it desirable.
Right.
And you know, I feel like you're you're bringing your fashion sense into the into the kind of, because part of it is it's changing the like assumptions and the what is it, the biases that people in like your community and in,
Right.
have.
Right. So I definitely try to show myself in these spaces to say that it's okay. Like, you may have questions or concerns or worries about what's out there, but I'm out there, and I want to invite you to come experience these things with me. And I hope that by people seeing someone who looks like me out in those spaces, unafraid and freely exploring, that others will feel more comfortable doing the same thing.
And I suspect part of it is developing a community to promote and pursue those activities. And I know you've taken on, or you had taken on, a leadership position in something called Mappy Hour. Is that right?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a local organization in New York City. It's basically a community of city dwellers who also love the outdoors. So we would get together a couple times a month and share beers, read maps together, learn different survival skills. We would lead hikes, bike rides, kayaking trips, basically anything you can think of and any excuse that we could think of just to get out and do some of the things that we love. We have been doing that on a monthly basis. And the organization has existed over 6 years now, and it's stretched to cities all across the country where people are starting their own chapters. And I joined the New York chapter about 1.5 years ago, and immediately I knew that this was a community that I wanted to be a part of because they were doing the things that I was most interested in at the time. And so I just decided to step into a leadership role. And so I became one of the chapter leaders of New York City. So I've been helping to put together the different events and meetups that we take part in. And when people show up to one of our meetings, I'm usually one of the first faces that they're greeted with. And I love making those connections and hearing about people's experiences in the outdoors and why they love it so much. And it's just a great atmosphere to be around. And at my previous job at Bloomingdale's, I wasn't necessarily the happiest there. So it was nice to sort of leave work and go join this community that I loved being around all the time. So it's been a really great experience for me.
Are you thinking of building something like that in Baltimore, or and also, like, how can that still be done during the pandemic?
We've definitely had to use some different approaches. A lot of our meetups over the last few months have been over Zoom. So it's definitely different. And we started to talk about how we might come back to face-to-face interactions. And I've been away from the city for a while, but I think they're starting to plan some in-person hikes. Of course, limiting the number of people who can come and keeping social distancing and mask wearing in mind. So I think we will eventually figure out how we're going to move forward from this, but for the most part, we've strictly been limited to Zoom.
Yeah, I'm wrestling with that with my Wild Call weekends this summer. I used to do them over 3 days, and the first day it was all outdoors.
Yeah.
The first day was an orientation where people would sit in a large circle, which was, people were easily 6 feet apart from each other, and it was outside, so the risk was probably low. But then, there's food on the first day. At the core of it is this fast, but the first day there's 3 meals, and the last day there's 2 meals. And so what I've done is I've changed it to doing it over 3 weekends, mm-hmm. where the first weekend will be on Zoom. But it's, even with like the Campfire City last night experienced, it's not the same. And I can feel even just listening to people and being present and seeing how I can help, it's much harder. I mean, it's much harder to sense what's going on in another person when you're not physically with them. I mean, you know what they say, 99% of communication is nonverbal. And
Right.
you get a lot of it on Zoom, but, you know, with little postage-sized images of people's faces,
Yep.
you know, when you're with people, a group of people, you can feel things from the side of your head, you know, that person's uncomfortable, you know, with little fidgets or stuff that you just don't get from Zoom.
Yep.
Or you can feel that you can sense that somebody's having I don't know, there's all kinds of things that are missing in the conversation. So I'm kind of toying with the idea, well, could I do it where people bring their own food? You know, and then in the woods, you have to, you know, food is an issue.
Yeah.
My mother said to me once, I love this, like when you're planting a garden with a lot of nature around, you have to plant enough for everyone, meaning
Right.
all the critters, right? And if you put if you don't manage food very carefully in nature, things can go wrong.
Yeah. Very quickly.
Yeah, and so I don't know that I have fully. The easy way out is to do the Zoom, but I know it's not going to be as intense an experience. So you know, I'm sad about that. But this is a time of change, and we have to figure it out. It's also, I feel like nature's giving us a big slap in the face. You know,
Oh,
like a
yeah.
wake up call.
I feel that too. And you can see it. We've been talking about climate issues for how long now? And then all of a sudden we're forced to sit still and stay home. And all of a sudden the skies are so much clearer and bluer. And it seems like nature is thriving while the rest of the world is sort of struggling and trying to come to terms with all that's going on. And I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know that, you know, I mean, that's a hopeful view. I think nature needs a lot more help from us in the form of, what do they call it, remediation, you know, to thrive. I think it's I'd say nature's, you know, this is good for nature, but a lot more needs to be done for the thriving to happen.
Right.
You know, and I also, well, there's two things I want to mention to you. One is, I don't know if you know any of my background in the world of environmental justice and things like that, but you know, one thing, before I just tell you a little bit about that, one thing that, you know, is so upsetting to me, like as upsetting almost as the George Floyd thing was the birding incident in Central Park. You know, where when you add race to this human relationship with nature, I mean, that was just such a horrifying but graphic and important. Like, what did you think about that when that happened?
You know, initially I was disgusted by it. You could clearly see that she knew exactly what she was doing and weaponizing that phone call. But at the same time, it was important for the entire world to see that, because it forced everyone to face the fact that this actually happens on a regular basis. And you may not have seen it as much as people of color have seen it, but now you have to see it and you have to accept that it's real. So
As disturbing to me as what she did was, I don't know if you saw her like apology afterwards. It was so
yeah,
formulaic. It was so like scripted by like a press PR. I mean, I don't know if she came up with it or her handlers came up with it or whatever, but it was as disgusting. It was like, well, that's how this stuff continues. Is we, you know, there's like some kind of a spin, and we move on.
right. And there's no real way of knowing whether that apology was genuine or whether it came just because her life was falling apart, as she mentioned. I don't really know what to make of that.
Yeah, and I wonder what that guy's doing now. But I mean, I hope I don't know. It's sad to say, but hope he can use that to help promote birding among African Americans or whatever, you know?
Yeah, I just saw something a couple of days ago where a news outlet actually went birding with him. So
Yeah,
they just allowed him to be in that space and do what he does.
yeah. And so like just my background in this is going back years where I in the 80s was involved in what's called, are you familiar with the phrase environmental justice, environmental racism? You probably, right?
Yeah,
And so I don't know if you know this, but I was the guy that wrote the first national study that proved that environmental racism exists in America.
wow,
And it led to a presidential executive order that for any federal spending, it has to go through a process of making sure that there's not disproportionate impacts against people of color and stuff like that.
right,
And I remember at the time that I got when I first, well, first of all, it was not easy to prove it, and when I finally proved it and started telling people, I got two reactions. One was, that's impossible. There's no way, there's no connection between race and income, things like race and income and pollution. That people were just like, this, that's just a coincidence.
right.
That was one reaction. And then the other reaction was like, duh, like, of course, like nobody's going to put the toxic waste in the rich neighborhood, in the white neighborhood. So
Yep.
that was kind of funny, but it was like a reality sitting in plain sight that no one saw, or I'm not saying no one saw, but the majority didn't see, the government didn't see, yeah, it's interesting, and it's been amazing to watch it unfold over I don't know how many decades it's been, where now it's, when people talk about the disproportionate impact of coronavirus, for example, on people of color, it's all
Yeah,
part and parcel of the same type of structural inequities.
right. I think that was also a big wake up call.
Yeah. So I've been in that. I was in that fight, and I for years, but I burned out.
Yeah,
I had to leave the field, basically, for a lot of reasons. One is that I'm not the right skin color to be an advocate. Well, yeah. Well, I shouldn't say it that way. It's that it was too. Yeah, I guess my whole. I don't know if I should get into this, but maybe I have. I mean, I guess I have a controversial view of racism in a way, and I don't know if I want to go there in this conversation, but in the sense that, well, let's just say it's complicated and it works in many ways,
yeah,
So there's a lot of history and baggage that's really complicated, and there's as much there's bias, and everyone is biased and prejudiced, what I think is what's controversial, I think, and I don't know how I'll be curious to hear how you feel about this, is I kind of think everyone is racist in the sense that we are all buying into we all accept the existence of race, like as though it's reality, and there, and that I know it sounds horrible to say that, because the history of what people have done in the name of race is real and is horrifying,
hmm,
and there's a lot of reality to it, but it's all based on this figment that we all buy into. Do you know what I'm saying? So like underneath the institutional racism, which I am, like I agree, I see as clear. I mean, I see as clearly as anyone in my position could see. I think there's a kind of deeper reality, which I think gets into like issues of nature, of how we. I don't know. I'm babbling a little. Is that triggering you, or?
I would just say that I don't know if I would say we all accept the concept of race, but it's taught to all of us. Whether we, like, when you look at children, they have no idea what race is, and they don't too much care from what I see, but over time they are taught it and they start to learn what race means and how it will affect their life, if at all. So I don't know if we're all just, I mean, maybe once we're taught it, we do just accept it, but I don't think everyone just accepts it. And I don't think we have to just accept it.
Well, what I wonder, I mean, so that I know that's a prevalent perspective, and it's hopeful because if it's just something we're taught, then we can teach something else, and then change can happen really quickly.
Right.
I have my gut tells me it's not all taught. That we perceive difference, and everyone's different. You know, there's tall people and short people, and there's old people and young people, and that's not just being taught to people. That's a that's a we notice these things, and you know, people from different backgrounds and different you know, and like it's not just skin color. There's a whole complex of physiological features that people see. It's the categorizing of it, I think, that's probably what is taught. You know, to say, oh, that set of features puts you in this category, and that set of features puts you in this. You know, but I wonder, like, if we were to teach it differently, would it disappear? I don't know.
I don't know. There's also a lot of unlearning that would need to be done, and that's a very challenging process.
Yeah. And I guess another thing that I wonder is, is there a way we can use nature to help us unlearn? And is there a way we can, like with what you're doing, bringing people into nature? Well, I would just say I think that's a key part of the medicine. And I don't have all the answers, but I know that's what I'm devoting myself to now.
I agree. And the way I look at it is that nature serves all of us, regardless of who we are or what we look like or where we come from, what we've done in our lives. It serves us all the same way. And I think that's a key lesson to take forward. And I think that we maybe don't pay enough attention to that. Like the trees don't give certain people more oxygen than others. We all breathe in the same air, and it comes from the same source, and it's here for all of us. So I think there's sort of that shift in perspective that can really make a difference.
Yeah. Although the problem is that there's inequities in who owns resources.
Right.
And sharing, investing in, you know, this requires changing the way things are. It requires there's you know, there is a way to do it where it's win-win, but it also probably means that some people that have more access to those resources, well, they need to share, and they're not necessarily going to do that without being told to.
Right, or forced to.
That's what I mean. Without being policy and governmental action. Yeah. So it's a heavy lift, but I think you're right. It starts with us doing our own individual work.
Yeah. It's just, I'm still trying to come up with like the perfect way to paraphrase everything, and I just am not coming up with it.
Like what? Paraphrase what?
I don't know, like an overall message that might contribute to some sort of solution or massive change. But yeah, it's individual work that we all have to do, and it's hearts that need to change overall. And how do you change someone's heart, or can you?
Yeah,
that I don't know.
I don't know either. I know one thing I saw recently that was interesting is You know the book Lord of the Flies?
Hmm.
I might be. This is from memory, so I might be getting some of it wrong. But we did you read that in high school, or I think
Yeah, they
all
made us read it in middle school, I think, or high school, one of the two.
yeah. So we're all. This is part of the teaching, how we're all and I don't remember the book in detail, but I do remember a lot of it is you leave young kids alone in nature, and they become brutal, right?
Hmm.
And they become
Yep.
animals, like animals in the kind of negative uh, trope of like hurting, like unnecessary, becoming vicious.
Yeah.
And I saw an article that recently where that was based on a real. I don't know if have you heard this. It was based on a real event where some kids were stranded on an island, I think, and it literally happened. I don't remember if it was off of Australia or something like that. And the exact opposite is what happened. That's what's really weird, is that the
Wow.
story was completely contorted. The exact opposite happened. That these young boys were rescued after months or weeks, or I forget how long it was, and
Right.
the exact opposite happened. They took care of the weak ones. They completely bonded with each other. They were the opposite. They took care of each other. Natural leaders. They all took. There was all kinds of natural leadership emerged from them, and it was all about helping the whole group of people. Now that was not a. I don't think it was a diverse group of boys,
Hmm.
but that's part of, I think, the relearning that nature can help us with, is that we've been taught these myths uh,
Yeah.
that aren't necessarily, that are packed full of meaning and archetype, but aren't necessarily true.
Right. Yeah, it makes me wonder why we received the version that we got,
Yeah.
and what was the intention behind altering the story like that?
Well, and I mean, it was a fabulous story, and I forget the name of the author, but I mean, obviously, it was a masterful work of fiction. But it's
Hmm.
also like, well, why? And it was a lesson. I mean, the author wasn't in favor. I don't think any of us read that thinking, oh, this is a good thing.
Right.
And maybe a story that showed how wonderfully the kids helped each other wouldn't have been as interesting. But it's curious that it becomes part of the national curriculum, and I don't know if it's taught all over the world. It certainly wasn't a American. This didn't happen. It did. I don't remember who wrote it, but the story wasn't based on anything that happened in the United States. But I grew up in Philly, and I was taught it. I'm a lot older than you, so it's been it's probably taught all over this country to every little most little kids.
Yep.
Like, what is that?
Who knows? The only thing I remember from that story was sort of the power struggle between all of the characters. And I don't know, it sort of matches what we see in our society.
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to claw their way to the top, and we see the 1% sitting at the top, and everyone else is just struggling to figure out how to even come close to that.
Well, it also, I think, shows up in the rhetoric uh,
Hmm.
of fear and division,
Yeah.
and the hordes, and a lot of the stuff that we're hearing nationally about how the protesters are. It's like they've gone hog wild. Well, I don't know where that phrase comes from, but that might come from some horrible history, that phrase. But I mean that we have to be afraid. It's used to stoke fear of people of color. It's used to stoke fear of people protesting. It's used to stoke fear of young people, right?
Yeah. And that always happens. You see an instance where an unarmed person of color is murdered by the police. Immediately, you see the media start to almost attack the victim and try to pull out instances where the individual may have committed wrongdoing. And I never understand why they sort of do that. Like with Botham John, who was murdered in his home by the off-duty police officer, they tried to draw up the narrative of his marijuana usage. And I didn't get where that came from, and I didn't get why that was necessary to bring up when he was just sitting in his home watching television. But that always happens. The narrative about people of color, and specifically Black people and Black men, is always sort of skewed to make us look more dangerous and threatening and intimidating to society. And it's really confusing.
Yeah. I heard a story on the news this morning. There's, I think for months or weeks or months, there's been a protest. There's been a protest community that's been stationed outside of City Hall, I guess, in New York City, and it's one of these like police-free zones, in the sense that anything that the protesters are trying not to involve the police.
Yeah.
And apparently there was some mentally ill person recently that was going around assaulting people, and I think it was an African American guy, big guy, grabbed him and hugged him to stop him, like just gave him a bear hug. And they weren't going to ask the police. They didn't want to ask the police to intervene, even though this guy had to be stopped. And
right.
And the guy bit the bear hugger on his face. He had to go to the hospital. But I don't think they ended up ever calling the police, and I'm not sure what happened. But I guess where I'm going at this is the whole like defund the police thing. It's all related to this Lord of the Flies, and it's all related to, the way that we've built up this carceral state is all related to these myths we're taught as kids.
Right.
And it's not that there's no truth in the myth. There is truth in it, but it's not the whole truth. And
right.
It's a distorted version of the truth, and it's built on exploiting fears.
Yeah. Exactly.
And those fears are rooted in nature,
Yeah.
And the thing is we're now in this highly civilized, or whatever word you want to use, like highly non-natural environments where it's mostly just people and human structures and human environments where there's very little like there's no animals that are going to attack us, but we're still it's still so deep in our unconscious that a huge part of, I think, people's consciousness is wrapped in fears from those natural, from long ago, from those natural things, and it's being displaced. Like, okay, I'm not going to be afraid of the bear because there's no bears, but instead I'm going to be afraid of this black man, or something, or what I'm saying. It's all this, like, in other words, like, it's almost like people are looking for something to do with their fear.
Yeah. Who can we put it on next?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I bet you agree, but I mean, I think the most scary, fearful thing is what we've done to nature. This is the existential threat that we have, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just amazing to me that we could be in this country and in many countries where people don't get that. That's not where their fear is. That's not the target of their fear. The target of their fear is usually other people who are worse off, who have less means, who are oppressed, right?
Yeah. So you have to really go deep to really know where your fears are coming from. And again, it requires a lot of work.
This is the work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true. And it sounds Pollyannish, but I feel like the more that you do work on yourself like this, the more the fears evaporate, and you realize how, well, it sounds so silly, but how, like, just if we could replace all that fear with a little more love.
Yes.
And not only for each other, but for like the Mother Earth. I mean, I feel so sappy saying this, but that's the thing. Like, it's not as good of a story as Lord of the Flies, right?
Yep.
It's too saccharine or something. What does the butterfly represent on your neck?
I love butterflies. They move so gently and gracefully, and it's almost as if they just allow the wind to carry them wherever it's blowing, and that's sort of how I like to maneuver.
I have a field in the Poconos where I do the wild call weekends, and I have been slowly trying to propagate milkweed, and
Hmm.
the butterflies love the milkweed. So this summer, there's a lot more butterflies than there used to be, and it's beautiful to see them. And they're so it's so nature's so extraordinary, like how there's so many different colors to the butterfly. It's
Yeah,
amazing, and that we could lose all that. I
yeah.
mean, we're losing it.
We're destroying it.
Yeah, it's horrifying. So, well, what else? Should we end it there? Or tell me, what have we not covered?
I don't know. I think we've touched on a lot, more than probably what I was prepared to touch on, but that's okay.
Do you think, I don't know, and I can cut this out if not, but do you think that being a gay man ha, has somehow been part of why you're drawn to nature in a way which is kind of countercultural for like what you said, your family's telling you don't go there?
Yeah. Well, from my experience, nature just allows me to be exactly who I am. I don't have to alter myself in any way when I'm in the midst of the trees and the dirt, the ocean. I can just be exactly who I am. And it doesn't matter what my skin color is, it doesn't matter what my sexual orientation is. As I said earlier, nature is going to serve me the exact same way as everyone else. And to me, that's just a powerful feeling to know that I can just be myself. Because, growing up, I heard that I was going to have all of these challenges because of my skin color and my orientation. And even with my tattoos, I was told that, oh, life is going to be so much harder because you have tattoos. And I figured, well, my life is already going to be hard because I'm gay and I'm black. So what are the tattoos going to matter? But when I'm exposed to nature, none of it really matters at all. So that's what I love.
Can I ask you one more question? Since this is all about change, well, two questions. Let's see. Yeah, what's the biggest change that you've experienced in your life, and what's the change that you hope to see, that you most hope for?
Biggest change that I've experienced. I don't know if I could pin it to just one. I mean, moving to New York was a huge change. That was my first experience really going off on my own and leaving my safety net, meaning my parents and my family and friends behind, just to pursue my own life and my own future. That decision to go to Iceland on a whim, that was a major change in my life. It changed the way that I viewed the world, and it changed the way that I have gone about life since that experience. So I would probably stick to those two experiences. Going to new places, that always provides a massive change because you're seeing something that you haven't seen. You're exposing yourself to new cultures. You're learning new things about not only the place you're visiting, but yourself and how you interact with these spaces. So,
What was the biggest change you saw about that you what can you describe, like how, like Iceland for example? What was the change? What happened? How did you change?
I had always felt that I probably wasn't going to make it very far in life. And I always thought that there was a cap in terms of the level of success that I might reach or what I might contribute to the world. And with the Iceland experience specifically, I realized that I can really go as far as I want. And whatever I want to make happen, I can make it happen. And there's no cap as long as I'm waking up every day and breathing. And I've carried that with me ever since. And that's why I'm not afraid now, even though I was laid off from my job and I'm back in my parents' place and I don't know what's going to happen today or tomorrow or next week or next month. I don't know which direction my life is about to take, but it doesn't even matter because I already know that I'm equipped with everything that I need to go exactly where I need to go and do exactly what I need to do. And before that Iceland trip, I wasn't aware of that at all. I didn't believe that was a possibility, but now I know it's a fact.
It's amazing. And if I read into it, it's all the result of your taking action. Like there was no guru. You weren't under someone's tutelage. It was your own action, right?
Yeah, it's so funny because before I decided to book that flight, for years I had been saying, oh, I wish I had a mentor, or I wish I had somebody who could just sort of guide me along the way, or somebody to show me something, and that never came. And I found out that I had to do it myself. I had to do my own work, and booking that flight was the first step. And it all came down to me and my own action, as you said.
It's amazing. And what about the change in the world? This is a big question. Or it doesn't have to be change in the world. What's the change that you most hope for?
The change that I most hope for, I want to see more compassion on a human level. I think humanity lacks compassion on a massive scale. We lack compassion for the earth and for nature. We lack compassion for one another. And we can't continue on like that. And we're seeing it now. We're being told, we're literally being forced to sit in our homes and we're being told things need to change now. And I think that compassion is a huge part of that.
It's wonderful. And if I can put my 2 cents to that, which is, I don't think it's just about nature serves all of us. I think it's also that compassion has to be, we need to start thinking about how we must serve nature.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just serving ourselves, serving each other, but if we don't start serving the natural environment and valuing that service,
right,
and making that a part of our economy, a key part of our economy, we're in trouble.
Yeah, this won't be the last traumatic situation we find ourselves in if we don't start to change immediately.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Compassion is the key ingredient. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you again for having me. It's been wonderful.
It's been fun. I look forward to staying in touch with you, and I would love to figure out ways to collaborate. I think we're very like-minded in what we're trying to do.
Absolutely.
By the way, just one of the things that I'm launching, that might be of interest to you. Well, it's interesting to me. So, my son is transgender. He's actually African American and transgender, and so instead of just going and doing another Campfire City series, I decided I'm going to try to start a something less structured, but an online support group for parents and family of transgender kids or transgender people,
right,
and going in transition. It's part of my theme of change.
Yeah,
and of course the underlying, the secret message is it's not that the transgender people are changing, it's that we need to change,
right,
to accept them. And so that's the next thing I'm about to launch. And so I might actually do one of my Wild Call weekends for that particular audience. I'm not sure, but anyway, I hope to stay in touch with you. I hope you can come to one of my Wild Call weekends, and if there's ways I can help you and ways we can collaborate, let me know. I would love to do that.
Definitely. Even if I move back to Maryland, I'll still be frequenting the tri-state area. And yeah, however I can help, I'm willing to do that. And I want to participate. So I look forward to it.
All right, cool. And keep me posted on whatever you're doing in the future. And
Okay,
love to stay in touch.
will do.
All right, man. Have a great day. Thank you.
Okay, sounds great.
All right. Good to
All
talk
right,
to you.
thanks. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Nature Breakthroughs podcast with Dr. Wild Ben Goldman to discover what you need for personal, organizational, and societal change. Get your free download of 3 ancient rituals smart entrepreneurs use to bounce back from shifts in the market and inside themselves. Go to www.naturebreakthroughs.com.